Thank you everyone for joining today's webinar. And at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Bill.
Thank you, Michelle. Good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining our Risk Advisory webinar series. This is our first webinar of 2023, so Happy New Year to everyone. Again, my name is Bill Heaven. I'm a Senior Director here at HBK in our Risk Advisory practice. And again, I'd like to thank you for joining us today. We're going to cover what I think is a very important and interesting topic. It's finding risk within your organization. As I said, I'm with HBK. I've been here for almost 5 years. I have a dual role where I do internal IT security for HBK, as well as some client-facing responsibilities. This morning, I'm joined by Tyler Gargano. Tyler is our Director of Compliance Controls, and actually I butchered that all up, Tyler, sorry about that. Risk, Compliance, and Controls here at HBK. He's a graduate of Ohio Northern, and he has a vast background in organizational controls. So I'd like to thank him for taking time out of his busy schedule to talk with us this morning. And this is the agenda that we're gonna cover this morning with Tyler's talk, and I'd like to cover just a few housekeeping issues. So today's presentation is eligible for 1 hour of CPE credit. In order to obtain that credit, you're going to need to remain online for our entire session and answer 4 content-sensitive questions. They're going to pop up throughout the presentation today. The last question is basically a yes/no that says, do I want CPE for today's session? If you do, just answer yes. We've muted all the incoming lines. So if you have any problems, we are monitoring the control window on the right-hand side of your screen. So you can just put a chat in there and we'll address that for you. And we do plan on leaving about 5 to 10 minutes at the end of Tyler's presentation to cover questions. So you can queue them up for us as we go during the presentation. You can send it in to the Q&A, but we're most likely going to address those at the end. And there is a PDF copy that's been loaded out there in the Meeting Control Center that you can download for, just to have. And also, we are recording today's webinar, so we'll send out links to that before the end of the week. So if you have any colleagues that weren't able to attend that you'd want to share today's webinar with, you can forward a copy of that link. And without further ado, I'm going to turn things over to Tyler. So Tyler, take it away.
Thanks, Bill. I appreciate it. Hello, everybody. Happy New Year. Very happy and excited to be speaking with you all today. As Bill said, I think this topic is interesting, but also very applicable to companies. I think that it's a conversation that not a lot of people like to have, but I think it's extremely useful if you're planning your risk and planning appropriately throughout your organization. I've been with HBK for almost a year now, heading up the Risk Compliance and Controls group with a main focus on internal audit methodologies and communications, as Bill noted. My team and I, we work together to help our clients not only better understand business operations, but also how to be more efficient and focus on really what matters in daily business and where the focus should be as an organization. Today's agenda, we're going to have a few topics to run through, and then, as Bill noted, please utilize the Q&A function. If anything comes up that you might have a question on that could be applicable to your business or just in general, please feel free to utilize that function. And as well, at the end, my email address and contact information will be on the screen and shared with everybody. So please feel free to reach out and contact me with any questions or, to connect at all. I would really, really look forward to that. Topic-wise, we're going to look at how risk is viewed across organizations and kind of what different types of risks there are that you could see in your day-to-day operations and business. We're going to look at how we are going to evaluate risk and what a risk appetite is. We're going to look at best practices to understand where to find the risk that's in your organization. Every organization has some set of risk and some set of appetite for risk and how they're handling and mitigating and managing risk. So understanding how and where to find it is crucial. So to get kicked off, kind of want to ask a broader question of what is the goal of identifying risk within your organization. As I said earlier, this is a touchy subject. In a lot of the research that I was doing, a lot of the historical, clients and current clients that I deal with, nobody likes risk. It's just not something that people want to talk about, people want to deal with and work within. There's 6 main types of risks that I like to break down for my clients that we're going to walk through here in the upcoming slides. But ultimately, it comes down to a game plan. It's a strategy of, are we ready to and prepared to mitigate the risk and find ways where risk is always going to be within the organization. So how can we understand it? How can we better work with the risk rather than kind of assume it's not there or pretend it's not there? I think that this the meme that's on your page, I think, is pretty applicable for 2 reasons. One, I don't know who doesn't love the Pirates of the Caribbean, and 2, this is a feeling that a lot of CFOs, audit directors, controllers feel within the organization when it's that you get in the November, December, January month, it's time to start scoping and thinking about the current or future years of what the risk is and where you're going to be testing and where the applicable strategies are going to be applied for the organization. However, it doesn't need to be this way. I think approaching the risk conversation of how can we mitigate this? How can we streamline our processes and streamline our organizations from a structural being into being able to work within day-to-day operations and understanding it kind of will become an afterthought in some cases. Risk management is often kind of a compliance issue. It's typically assumed that it can be solved up by drawing rules and different, laws per se that employees should be following, which is true. However, taking that risk-based approach and utilizing our control-based approach, it tailors to your specific business and it tailors to where that risk is and how we can better combat it. So we're going to roll into the different types of risks that I noted a little bit ago. So you'll see the 6 types of risks as well with a graphic on your screen right now. No particular order. The risk that I like to do this, and this is all going to make sense at the end because I have an actual risk assessment from a client that we use. And you'll see kind of how we view risk from our side of things in the RCC and HBK view. But financial risk, which is going to be looking at the black and white, the likelihood of losing money on a business or sometimes an investment decision. What's our finances look like? What does our financial statements look like? And where's the risk within the finance department? Operational risk, I sit a lot within these kind of financial and operational risks. I spend a lot of my time here. Operational risk is looking at flawed or failed processes, procedures, systems, or even events that are just going to disrupt business operations. Regulatory risk focuses more on the risks of laws and change. A lot of our clients work within different states, work within different industries, could be internationally. So regulatory risk is extremely crucial and important when you are looking to either expand or continue your business operations statewide, international-wide. Reputational risk is damage that occurs when kind of expectations aren't met. It's your reputation per se. It's how are you perceived to stakeholders, to investors, to clients, so on and so forth. Inherent risk is risk that is posed by an error. It's an error on a financial statement basis. It's an error on an internal control. It's kind of inherently within your company. And finally, cyber risk can probably be defined in about 25 different ways. I think to summarize cyber risk, it's risks that relate to loss of integrity of information, available information, data, or controls within those systems that are operating to run your business. Impacts of the IT organization in an IT environment can be detrimental to any company. I'll run into this in a few slides, but extremely crucial information on the cyber risk and what it can do and impact the business. Looking at the graphic on the screen now, I think this is a really, really good depiction on how to understand what you can do with risk and how you can better combat it per se. starting up at the top, developing a strategy. I think that's always going to be step one. I think understanding, okay, this is real and this is what we should do to combat what issues we may be having within our organization. Developing a strategy of, hey, we're going to start looking at stuff in a control-based approach, or, we haven't really thought about updating our policies and procedures for the last 5-10 years. Let's revisit those and make sure that we are doing what we're saying we are doing. Starting with that developed strategy, it helps you understand in some cases and helps you see where the risk could potentially be. The next step is going to be create an audit plan. With an audit type brain that I have, I like to kind of view things in a more technical sense of this is what we should be doing to combat it by doing a series of tests. Audit plans help business leaders not only test those areas, but revisit and test the areas that potentially might not have passed. Understanding that what's going to come from your audit might not always be what you want it to be or what you want to see, but it's beneficial and good information that you're going to derive from it. Typically, your risk assessment procedures, which we're going to talk into those later, is where you're going to identify your scope. You're going to look at your audit plan. You're going to see results from either a financial statement or an operational basis that's going to drive your risk assessment, which will then drive your audit scheduling and your audit planning and scoping for the year. I'm going to look at combining the next two areas. They're kind of bled into one of the same. So select tools and protocols and manage, train, and assign auditors. It doesn't even need to be auditors. It could be people. I think this is extremely important because you're looking at what tools do we have to view our organization? What tools in IT and HR and sales do we have to view what's going on with our day-to-day business? And rolling into that is, are our people trained? Do our people know what's expected of them when we're performing tests or in day-to-day business? Should they be, does somebody know what should be done? We run into this case a lot of an employee has been with the company for 30, 40 years, and they've just always done it one way. And that's just how they do it. It works, and it is what it is. Might not be the best way, but it works. But it also might not be the way that management intends it to do, which can show a varying level of risk that could come into the company. So consistent training, consistent communication, having your employees better understand where the benefit side of everything is extremely important.
Hey Tyler, with I know you have a very vast I'll say audience of people that you do work for, but is there anything you can give us some hints on? I mean, a lot of the smaller companies obviously aren't going to be able to have auditors. Is there a way they can do that themselves, or is it best just to bring you in? What are your thoughts on that area?
Both. I think great question, Bill. I think both answers to that. I think one is as a CFO controller type person, which I see a lot of the people on the webinar right now, and a lot of people that will tune in, they have that control to view the organization as what's going on. They're more in the weeds, they're more in the understanding of what the day-to-day business should be and what the day-to-day business should look like. From that capacity, where they can start thinking about performing tests and start thinking about going to more a risk-based approach environment rather than we're operating environment. And then on the converse side of that, bringing an external resource in, I think does help. I think with my experience, the firm's experience, other firms' experience, I think bringing external consultants in, I think is probably what I would lean towards if I was in charge of a business, just because of the expertise that they bring to a specific field. I know HBK specifically, with all of our niche groups and with all of the people that we have within the firm, it sets us apart where you can always get an answer from somebody that's an expert. So to answer that question, yes, in both ways, where those CFO, those controllers, CEOs, they have control to understand what those daily operations and what they want their business to do. And on the converse side, bringing in somebody that has expertise is always going to be a great differentiator.
Plus you got I don't know if you're going to talk specifically about fraud, but it always would eliminate that, where you don't have to worry about somebody, the fox guarding the hen house, so to speak.
Exactly. Yeah. And fraud risk is a crucial piece to risk assessments. Fraud risk is I'll show down below when we get into kind of the types of control testing and risk assessments. Fraud is a highlighted area that is tested amongst every single line item within the financial statements, as well as the operations that are going on. I've seen many different types of fraud and what's moving within organizations from a manufacturing side to a food service side to a, even on a hospital end. So yeah, fraud is an extremely hot topic, extremely relevant and persistent within the risk assessment procedures and policies.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Yeah, no, great question. Appreciate it. And then kind of in alignment with those and what Bill and I were talking about is you're going to produce findings and reports from these audits or reviews. Audits is kind of a harsh word, I could say, in some ways, where you might not have an audit team, but a review or a test in some sort, but you're going to produce a finding or a report or some type of deliverable that is going to show leadership, hey, here's what's going on. Here's how X location's performing and they're in alignment, or hey, they're not in alignment and we need to fix X, Y, and Z. I think working through this with leadership and having this communication and to drive the value of what's presented to stakeholders, to audit committees, to leaders. If we have a business that has varying business units, to those business unit leaders, I think is crucial. I think having somebody know what's going on across town at the same company that could not be happening over at this location is extremely important because it could happen. So produce those findings, communicate them out, so on and so forth. And like I said, that's going to be the main driver here is the communication piece. Communicating on the results of the risk assessments, communicating on the results of our audits or reviews and testing that are taking place is extremely important. I think we have a poll question. Poll questions will be up for, I believe, 30 seconds. They're going to kind of highlight what we have talked about. Any questions, or if you're having any issues, please use the Q&A function. Awesome. All right. I don't have a timer, so I couldn't give you a countdown, so my apologies. But I hope you got those CPE questions in. It's a good hour of CPE. So now we're going to touch back on what those 6 items that we talked about, kind of where they fall within organizations. So looking at financial risk, it's your financial side of your business. It's your financial statements. It's your money. It's your investments. It's what's going on with your business. I think in a IT world, I think this is extremely important as well as typically that's how we operate in today's world. Is safeguarding of assets, so on and so forth. Data breaches, which we'll get into when we get to the cyber side of everything. But on an IT side, it's hand in hand, and you'll notice that a lot with what I'm going to talk about today. A lot of these kind of work in conjunction of everything, and go from there. And that's just kind of how it's going to work. So typically, what you're going to see here is going to be companies that are impacted through financial performance, so credit risk, market risk, operational risk, and liquidity risk. Their financial success is a little bit dependent on where these risks sit. Market volatility is going to be a driver for companies that are reinvesting, and companies that invest in say, your private equity and you're investing into other companies. You're going to be a market driver, not only within the stock market, but also within what the market in your local area is. Operational risk is kind of hand in hand with financial. How your operations are doing is going to drive how your financials are doing, so on and so forth. And then credit risk is also, we're at risk with hackers and with, various currencies nowadays. I know a lot of companies, at least the last 4 or 5 years, they, we're utilizing Bitcoin as a currency and as a means of doing business deals, and all is fine within the cryptocurrency, but you have a pretty significant increased risk of people getting into your information, hacking back through, so on and so forth. So financial risk is utilizing kind of what our financial positions are, what our financials sit, and kind of the 4 main things that break into those is where are we safeguarding? How are we making sure that we are comfortable with what not only financial information we're representing, but also where our finances are. Operational risk is going to be the risk that is looking at flawed processes, policies, systems, events that kind of disrupt business operations. I spend a lot of my time here. This is a lot of my job. So it's looking at how are we tying all of these 4 people, processes, system, and events, internal and external, kind of into one. What makes sense here? I utilize a lot of times, and I'll kind of run through these 4 pictures that you see on your screen, but within the systems, how are people using them? Are they using them as appropriate? Are they using them as intended? And then are they following the process that management has instilled and management wants our people to execute and follow across? And then, like I said earlier, are people trained and are people up to date on new items and what's going on within the businesses? And then internal and external events are also crucial to operations. If we have staffing issues, if we need to utilize what's going on internally and how we are going to shift our staffs, it leaves us for a side of risk. And I think that it's a driver of what the organization can do and how it can respond to risk. Very similar with external. External might have more of an impact as what's going on with the world. I mean, even today, for instance, up here in Pennsylvania, we're getting snow. So, what's that doing to business? Truck drivers and communications that could go haywire. What's that doing to our operations? Ensuring that we have a plan, ensuring that we're testing those plans. A disaster recovery audit is kind of what comes to my mind, or business continuity of, hey, this could happen, and are we prepared for it? Those are the type of reviews that I would kind of look at on an operational side for specific event type instances that could affect the business. Regulatory risk, which is going to be risks that are, like I said earlier, laws or regulations that hurt or change businesses or investments that are going on. This slide's a little bit, it's interesting in terms of what it depicts. And this was kind of the biggest risks around the world, which, business interruption is the number one, which is going to be IT, what comes to mind, or machinery shutdown. What does our shutdown time look like? What does even our load time looks like? We're in some cases, the operations might have to stop as we are fulfilling orders and loading trucks and getting out the door inventory. And funny enough, the second one being the pandemic outbreak, which hopefully we're on the tail end of what happens if this happens again. I think COVID painted a picture of different work environments and different ways to make things work and going on from there. And then 3, we have cyber incidents, which I think kind of goes into number 1 as well, of cyber being a 40% concern with business leaders around the world. Cyber is such a hot topic of ways that people can get into businesses, can understand businesses. I know that there's a client that I'm working with right now that's dealing with a cyber issue with hackers and what's it doing to their operations, because they're pretty much shut down, and kind of how are they combating to keep the business running, but also kind of shifting focus on what they can do to be resilient. And I think in alignment with this, also not only looking at kind of what your day-to-day business, when we're looking at more regulations and laws side, I work a lot with some cannabis companies here within the HBK portfolio, and state by state, there's different laws, and laws in Pennsylvania might be different from laws in Ohio, which are different from laws in Michigan, and then we go to a manufacturing environment where we're looking at might be operating internationally. And what does GDPR mean? What does GDPR impact our employees? What does it impact to our IT systems and how we're communicating with our overseas partners? Regulatory risk is kind of everywhere, and it's involved every day. So understanding kind of what environment you play in is important and crucial. Reputational risk, like I said earlier, it's kind of when expectations aren't met. It's when we're missing orders. We're not shipping out items timely. It's a negative reputation. And what you'll see kind of when we format this into a risk assessment and finding the risk is, does X location have a history of not fulfilling lead times, not fulfilling orders, or not abiding by contracts that are written agreements? A lot of reputational risk, I will say, can be mitigated through solid policies, procedures, controls in some cases to ensure that expectations will kind of always be met is kind of the mantra there. The graphic on your screen is kind of a 6-step way and kind of loops back and forth because this is an ongoing thing, because this is pretty much daily business of, setting your strategy, identifying where your riskers sit. Is it within a location? Is it within a corporate? Is it within our AP or billing, so on and so forth? Performing those on-site risk assessments, like I've been preaching on today, is understanding where that risk is sitting. Each location might view risk differently. Each location might have different risks based on location, layout, structure, so on and so forth. And I think the 6th point on your screen is ongoing tracking. I harped it earlier. I'm going to harp it again, that ongoing maintenance, monitoring of what's going on within the organization is crucial. Inherent risk. So it's noted in here that risk by financial statement or kind of factors other than an internal control failure. Inherent risks are kind of risks that you're dealt, and you kind of have to learn to work with and manage and mitigate. A couple of the items that you see on your screen are kind of like worst case scenarios of what's going on within risk. I think a couple call outs there would be like complex transactions, mergers, acquisitions. Company A could be acquiring company B, but company A might or not really know what's going on at company B and the inner workings. It's an inherent risk that you're going to face when you're acquiring another company or performing a difficult transaction through multiple lenders or multiple banks, so on and so forth. Complex financial estimates and honestly complex financial statements. I think simplifying what you know and simplifying what you can show to others is extremely important. I recently met with a client that they don't really have good financial statements because they don't really do them because they have too many businesses that are operating. That's a pretty big risk, that you don't know your financial performance of your company. You don't know what your month end, your weekend close looks like and where you're sitting as a whole company. Another call would be kind of previous audits not following up or reviews and not, if we had an ongoing issue and not utilizing our people and our resources to revisit these issues and revisit what's going on, raises the bar for risk. It raises the bar for an ongoing issue to keep being an ongoing issue and continuing to be an issue. Now, cyber. So cyber is critical. I think the graphic with the orange pie it paints a really good picture of what is cyber. It's a part of everything we do. You might not even know it, and it still is a driver in day-to-day work and life. Understanding kind of where the risks are at. So we're going to assess the risk, protect the business, and then operate with confidence. I think that's kind of the final step of being able to operate in confidence. Like I said earlier, I'm dealing with a client right now who had a cyber breach and they're shut down and they can't utilize their computers. They can't get into their information. And what do you do? So I think understanding how the threat got in, how vulnerable they were. A lot of the phishing schemes is going to be the answer, where you're clicking on something you shouldn't be clicking on. And utilizing the security and the functionality of your company, your firm. A lot of items on the risk assessment or risk view might not hit this because it's not going to be a clear picture on your financials or kind of how you're viewing your risk, but it's in everything that you do. So when I perform risk assessments, I like to kind of start with cyber. How many systems are you running? What are you looking at? Do you have people working remotely? Do we have people with multiple devices that are able to log into our systems and our networks? And then I think also another big key aspect of this is what's our reaction to this? What is our response to if something does happen in a cyber environment, and how we're combating it? Yeah, funny enough though, today I was, because I'm in a different office, I was logging into the internet, and MSN stated that it was a highlight on the screen and said that the number of Americans caught in data breaches jumped 42% this year compared to where we were last year. So the phishing emails, hackers are getting more sophisticated with how they're reaching out to our employees and what we're doing. Utilizing risk assessments and risk procedures will help close that gap. Training, maintaining, communication with our people. It's never wrong to ask the question of, did my CEO really send this message? In going from there. And I think on the other side of your screen, you're going to see that the biggest call out there, which I touched on a couple of those dots, would be monitor and manage. I think as business leaders in running kind of companies, understanding what's going on, where are we vulnerable, how can we manage our day-to-day business within a cyber environment.
Yeah, Tyler, probably one of the most important things is as you said, the user education and awareness. Phishing tests, simulations are great. I think the stats like 83% of breaches are initiated by a phishing email.
Yep.
So, I mean, employees are the weakest link in the chain. So
Exactly. And that comes inherent with business. And I think this is a great call out in terms of what I'm trying to tie into risk. And I think that it's in what we do. I tie cyber risk into every single one of my risk assessments because of, it's closed businesses before. There's a huge risk within the cyber environment that you might not know because you just work on your laptop and people are watching. So exactly, Bill. So this slide, so before we start moving into kind of a more organizational view, I kind of want to just highlight kind of what the functional views of most organizations look like. Broken up into kind of 6 big pieces, and they all work together. They all work interchangeably. Operations, finance, sales and marketing, risk management, HR, and then IT. They all kind of, like I said, rely on another, and they work in conjunction with another. So, in this case, HR could be relying and working on sales and marketing as, HR is setting the groundwork of, hey, here's what we want our employees to do. This is kind of our communication style, and this is what's going to work kind of in the business, and utilizing our marketing resources and how we're projecting out our company goes to the sales and marketing because they're the ones in the field and they're the ones utilizing kind of what HR's trained them to do and so on and so forth. So you can kind of spend time within this graphic alone of how does operations tie into IT, which I think we've done a good job talking about this morning, and kind of they all tie together. It's a functional view of kind of what an organization should be running. It's a machine in some cases. So rolling into different organizations, kind of how risk is viewed. So 3 big bullet points here. Not all risk is bad. I think that you can kind of break it up into what your risk assessment, what's been identified within your risk assessment is realizing that, it might not be a batten down the hatches and we're going to have to stop business for a day till we figure out what's going on and prepare for the worst. It's identifying risk at, your beginning stage of your year. It allows you the time to create those plans and create potential solutions to mitigate the risk and what's going on. I like to break it up in kind of 2 buckets: risk we're willing to take and risk we're able to take. Risk we're willing to take, it's common risk. We're familiar with this. We're used to what's going on within the organization. We're used to, say I'm running a manufacturing plant where the machines might be a little bit old and they might shut down for a little bit and that's going to delay orders a little bit. That's understanding what your risk is. And then conversely, risks we're able to take. This is going to kind of be the less common risk that's typically discussed because it's a little bit more of a hot topic, but it's the ability to take the risk is different than the willingness to take the risk. You're kind of in a forced hand in some cases to understand what could be the impact on your organization and within your environment. Growth can be created through risk assessments. I've mentioned this a handful of times, but I love the time of the year when we start thinking about this, and I love the time of the year when we start having the conversation of what are we going to do next year? Where's the problems at? What do we face this year, and how are we going to shape that into another review, or where do we need more controls, or where do we need tidier up policies and procedures? Risk assessments, if completed correctly, paint a really, really nice story of current state and what our future state can look like. I think that, growth and operational growth and in many different avenues can be created through risk assessments. And then finally, in kind of in conjunction with the next slide as well, is understanding your company's appetite for risk. Everybody's going to view risk differently based on what you're doing, based on your environment, based on your business and company. But it's kind of broken up into kind of 5 levels, 3 per se, low, medium, high, but different stages. 1 and 2 are going to be minimal level of risk or low level of risk that, it's minimal risk, low return. It's kind of like when I think of like a stock portfolio where I'm not going to pick the super risky stocks and I'm just going to kind of coast on by. Conversely, moderate into medium risk or high level of risk, you're looking a little bit higher of a risk, but a higher, what's our return back on? And then same thing with a higher level 5 or significant level of risk within your organization. What does your appetite look like if you're going to take those risks? I go back to the stock market of taking those higher risk companies to invest in and what you're looking at. I think the example I gave earlier around the M&A, I think is a perfect example of this of, do we know when we're going to merge or purchase a company, what we're kind of getting into? Do we understand what this initial investment is going to mean to our current business as well as the new business that we're acquiring? Where's their risk appetite? What do they view as problems in their business and day-to-day operations? I see a lot of times where, I've done projects for M&A groups where we're looking at what's the landscape look like and what's the shape look like of the current environment and current companies. Moving on to kind of more of the mud of how do we evaluate and identify risk. I think this is a great depiction of two simple answers. Test, and perform annual risk assessments. Continue to test your controls, continue to test your policies and procedures. View your organization as an aspect of, is everything going as planned? Can you answer that question of, this is how I intended the business to be running and what I'm anticipating in day-to-day results, reporting, and so on and so forth. And then, rolling back into I've been talking about risk assessments. I've been talking about kind of what these look like. It's shaped into kind of these 4 or 5 primary factors. Risk assessments are going to feed into kind of what's going on when we're looking at 4 factors of what the main gist of it is materiality of amounts, complexity of processes, history of errors, and then are we ready for change? Those are the 4 factors that kind of get graded up on within our frameworks of our financial risk, cyber risk, fraud risk, operational risk, so on and so forth. I think a couple of the call-outs here would be complexity of processes. Processes change; they change daily in some cases, and how you're managing those. Assessing those as a higher risk to kind of be more on the flag side of what the audits or your reviews should be is important. And then, history of accounting adjustments is another call out, I would say, where you can get a very high observation or a high risk view here, where this is an accounting issue. It's been an issue for many years, and we just don't know how to clean it up, or we just haven't revisited it because we've been too busy. A lot of times those will get flagged within the risk assessment procedures. Another CPE question. Great. So this is kind of the meat and potatoes of what this 38 minutes I've been talking to you all about kind of rolls into. This is what your risk assessment would look like and should look like. Is what you'll see here is a grading scale, and this was all derived by inputting information from financial statements. So it's broken up into a couple different ways where we're looking at, these would be the kind of the business units that take place within the organization or the different locations. Here we broke it into A through H, which might be a little bit smaller on your screen, so my apologies. But these are the different audit areas, HR, AP, inventory, so on and so forth. We utilize these kind of into this COSO objective and qualitative factors within the business of what's going on in terms of how are we applying this back to COSO framework and reporting risk, operational risk, and compliance risk, and what's going on there. We take these results and they're kind of formatted into a formula where what's going on is going to spit out a number, a 1 through 5, and then it's going to kind of conditional format into what is high risk, medium risk, low risk. It's really, really cool to watch Word as an Excel nerd per se, but understanding that what the picture is going to paint is important, because from here you can see from a financial statement item by location, by accounting area, where your risk is going to be sitting. From there, we take this and we format it into, hey, here's how we should be testing this. Here's how we should be approaching this throughout the year, and what's going on for our testing throughout the year in our auditable environments. A lot of times for companies that have multi-locations and varying plans throughout the year, we derive our 10, 15 audits directly from this kind of format. And then conversely, we can format our control testing also directly from this of, hey, this area might have been our, if I'm looking at this column where our impact is, or potential impact of, there might be some red here. So we should probably look at our policies, our procedures, our controls, or perform a formalized buttoned-up audit there and what's going on. This is kind of how you're going to find and identify the risk within your organization. To summarize it, kind of everything, this is what's going to paint that picture that I've been talking about today of what's going on and how you're going to be able to view the risk and what your risk appetite is. This is what you're, as a leaders within the company, where you're going to feel comfortable testing, where you're going to feel comfortable producing results from. These are very exciting. And like I said, this is normally done towards the tail end of the year as you're planning for the future year or the next year ahead. You utilize your historical results to paint that picture of what you see and drive back forth from there. Great. I think we have another poll question. Awesome. Hope you got that CPE. And kind of in conclusion and in wrap up here, HBK can help. I spend a lot of my time performing risk assessments. Doesn't need to be at the end of the year. For our companies and clients that might not have an internal audit function or when to kind of view this, we can perform a risk assessment at any time. We can look at operational risk, we can look at cyber risk, we can look at financial risk in terms of what your financial statements look like. My team and I, we take a lot of pride and passion in terms of mitigating risk and finding strategies to help slow risk down, slow those conversations down around this doesn't need to be a scary or a rough topic. I think that's where we spend a lot of our time is, hey, by implementing this policy, procedure, control, you're going to mitigate your risk because of X, Y, Z, or we're getting more efficient because of this control implementation, this control conversation that we're having. We have people at the ready to have those conversations with our clients and potential clients, and we're excited that we've gotten the work we've gotten so far and have been able to have these conversations. I think it's a very hot topic, and I think that as businesses grow and shape and merge and what's going on within many different sectors, I think viewing risk and viewing operational strategy is extremely crucial for success, and I think that's what's going to set your businesses apart. And we have a team at the hand ready for to be that assistance, to be that right hand of finding strategies, finding better ways or new ways to do problem areas within your business. And it all kind of stems from, where does the risk sit within your organization? A lot of times that's where I start my conversations of, what's going on? Where's the problems at? What keeps you up at night? And it's a lot of times it could be derived right from your risk assessment.
Right, and some other things to keep in mind there, Tyler, is, number one, if you don't know where your risks are at, you're really setting yourself up for not performing the objectives that you set out, because you never know when you're going to run into that roadblock. And then thing that more and more companies are running into is, everybody wants to get cybersecurity insurance. And one of the questions on all the applications now are, do you perform a risk assessment annually? So it's kind of like, you really I wouldn't say it's, obviously it's not a regulatory thing, but they're not going to give you cyber insurance if you don't
Right.
have a process in place to do a risk assessment. So,
Right. It's an important piece. Yeah, 100%. 100%.
yeah, very important.
Great. I think we had a couple questions. If I can pull those up. I think the CPE is going to come up.
We got to do, this is the most important CPE question in the whole deck.
Yep. Get that CPE.
And we did just receive a question. The first question is, how do you initiate the process of performing a risk assessment?
Thanks, Michelle. So initiating the process of a risk assessment is fairly simple. It's asking the question of, do I know what's going on in my company? Do I know where we could be vulnerable at? I think it's, Bill asked it earlier, and I think it was a great topic of, as you have kind of two options there and two answers there of, side one is, can I do this myself? And I think the answer is, yeah. How do you want to view your risk, and how do you want to mitigate what's going on in taking controls, processes? Do you have narratives and going from that route? I think also looking at your financials, can I put this in a way where I can see what's the impact on my business? Where a location or by accounting item, where's the impact? And then conversely, kind of utilizing your external consultants type people, having that expertise, understanding kind of when that time period should start, and what conversations we should be having with not only kind of the CEO and audit committees or the board members, but also to our business unit leaders of understanding we should have an eye out for this types of risk and what's going on, whether they be operational fraud, cyber, so on and so forth. It's a can of worms once you start digging into what's going on in organizations.
Okay, the next question that just came in is, when is a good time in the year to perform the risk assessment?
So kind of two answers to that one. Traditionally, I see a lot of people as they're scoping the next year. So November, December-ish time, kind of on a 12/31 year-end client, that would kind of be when you would start thinking about what we should be looking at next year. So your risk assessment should take place prior to those conversations. The risk assessment normally as a planning phase for the next year is step one. It's, okay, where do we start? And I think a risk assessment paints a picture. Also, if you might not have as broad of a reach to be able to do that, a full-blown risk assessment, you can perform a risk assessment at any time throughout the year. I think you can have the conversation and you can look at, a lot of business owners will know, I'm working with a client right now and they just point blank told me that they know that where the risk is sitting and they just don't know what to do and how to manage it and how to work within it. So we're going to be starting in March on where's the risk at? Where are we vulnerable at? How can we talk? And work within this and work amongst where the risk is sitting. So broad answer there, but can kind of take place at any time. Traditionally, we see it at the tail end or the start of the year, but it's normally kind of going to be that kickoff of the year.
Tyler, do you ever have people breaking up the risk assessment into chunks and doing those throughout the year? Like you said, you had 6 areas. Do you split those up instead of one big, huge effort?
100%, all the time. I think that's going to be the shape I think a lot of businesses are taking where, hey, I know, cyber might be a mess, but we're okay right now. We're not as vulnerable as we are in kind of our operational, and let's look at operations and then we'll move into cyber. So 100%. I like chopping it up like that because you get a way more detailed view and a way more kind of lensed view of what's going on at the organization by piece level, rather than, nothing wrong with the broad risk assessments, but you're looking at 20 different things. Like I think when the risk assessment was up on the screen in the presentation, I think it showed a lot of numbers and showed a lot of colors and stuff like that, which when you're looking at it, it's great. But breaking those up into individual reports and individual areas of your business, it helps. It helps the conversations. It helps leadership and management understand what's going on and what should be tested and viewed and looked at from that aspect.
All right, great, thanks.
Yeah. And then I guess on your guys' screen, you see my contact information. As I stated earlier, please reach out. I'd love to continue this conversation. I'd love to keep working together and working amongst our clients of where's the risk at, and how can we test this, and what strategies can we implement to test and to understand how to mitigate and slow down the company's risk portfolio and risk view. So, my contact information there. Bill is also there. Please utilize us and reach out to us. We'd love to continue to work together.
Okay, so Tyler, thanks again. I can't thank you enough. It's always good to bring up. We try to find the topics that are most relevant, and this definitely, you hit it right on the head there with the old hammer. This is important. It's going to give people tangible results. So again, if you I'll flip back so you got the contact. If you have any questions at all, please reach out to Tyler or myself. And like I said, we're going to provide a recording of this webinar. So I think it's good to go back and revisit some of the areas. And thanks again to Tyler for giving us such a important topic and covering it in so much detail. So I really appreciate it. If you want to mark your calendars for February, our February webinar is going to be on Wednesday, the 22nd of February. And again, if you have any questions, reach out to Tyler and myself. Thank you all for attending, and depending on where you're at, have fun with the snow. I think it's supposed to be stopping here soon, but thanks again for attending, and looks like we're going to give you a couple minutes back. So thanks, and have a great day. Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you.